Hello, everyone. Are you out there? This is Park Howell coming to you in webinar land. I'm trying to figure all this stuff out. We're using this new, what we think is a wonderful tool, Webinars on Air. And if you were around like 2 days ago, you saw us online practicing. Didn't mean for that to happen, but I guess that's why we practice. So it was like reality TV at its most because we were trying to figure out how to make this thing work. So it's great to be here. Hi, Susan. Glad to have you here. Lisa, great. It sounds like you can hear me. It sounds like we are live. It sounds like we are doing exactly what we are supposed to be doing. Did you all get a chance to see the poll that I posted within the last 15 minutes or so? Presumably you were able to take a poll while we were getting things ready. And if you did, would love to make sure that it's working, number one, because I got another poll that I want to start. And I'm going to try something here too real quick. I want to make sure that you can see my screen and everything is working appropriately. So tell me, give me the big thumbs up. Can you see my PowerPoints? Is it there for you all? No, could not see the poll. I'm not sure what's up with the poll, so we're going to try a different one. I like the shirt. Thanks, Kathy. Welcome, welcome. My poll button is grayed out. What? All right, let me see what's going on here. I appreciate all the help, by the way. It says stop poll. It worked once. Let's try this again. I'm going to reset the poll and see if this works for you. All right, coming at you with a new poll here. Hard to type and broadcast and talk and everything all at the same time. Here we go. Let's see. Does this poll work for you? Yes, no, yes, they're coming in. Keep rolling. Let's see how it goes. We're battling. We're even. We've got no up there a little bit. Keep it rolling. It might have been that I clicked out of it. We're going to keep it going here. Can you also let me know? Yes, I see the PowerPoint. Right on. We're good. Okay. Thanks, Glenn. I appreciate that. It's so great having you all here. I think we are just going to jump right in. Greg, welcome. Pete Walsh, glad to have you aboard. Here I am in my brand new suite. I got my brand new duds on. Picked them up yesterday. I thought the Business of Story logo was a little bit big, but I guess my eyes are going, and it is the web after all. Anyways, I am so glad to have you all here for our very first webinar in this series. We're going to do a series. Today's show is about really understanding why story is important now, more important now than ever, how we can use it in our lives to not only really get straight and clear with our own brand story, but how we can then apply that and express it through our brands, our personal brand story, through our professional brand story. And then number three, how we can really appreciate the stories that other people are on so that we can connect our stories with their stories, always placing them being our audiences, at the center of the story. And by the audience, I mean customers, I mean shareholders, stakeholders, employees, anybody you need to buy into your story. But if they're going to buy into your story, you have to own it first. So let's jump back over the poll. Let's take a look. So we've got, all right, fairly even of yes and no's on if you're good storytellers or not. What's interesting, when I do this in my, when I do this particular poll in workshops, I bet you I get 90% of the room saying, I'm not a very confident storyteller. It happens all the time. And this is even room full of communications folks. For whatever reason, it's just sort of dashed out of us at an early age. But today, my promise to you is to reignite within you that innate storyteller, giving you permission again to go out and do your thing and to truly move people and move mountains, move people to action and really make a difference. So here's why. Let's take a little bit of a step back in time and understand why story is more important now than ever. So you think about story. Our brains and the amoeba have the same goal, and that is simply survival. Now, we can go weeks without eating, we can go days without drinking, but we can only go, days without drinking, but we can only go about 35 seconds without creating meaning about something going on around us. It's all about stories. Story is that software to the hardwire of our brain. Now, we are constantly scanning our environment with our subconscious, probing for clues beneath the surface, the subtext of things, all with our embedded app called Curiosity. Now, think about Curiosity. It's essentially our basal search engine that allows us to scan our environment, bring in current happening stimuli, filtering it through past experience, all in an effort to give our brain the ability to try and predict the future. And we do that to create clarity out of the chaos of being alive. It's just that simple. We use story to create meaning in our life. Now, nature has gifted us with the most powerful talent unique to human beings, and that is the power of story to draw our rapt attention, fight or flight. Now, in all stories, we live vicariously through the hero. We get to try on trouble at the safety of our own comfort of our own living room, just to learn to see what we would do in case it happens to us, all in this ever-present need to create meaning out of the things happening around us. Now, all great stories have urgency, they have novelty, and they have surprise. And they basically are here to deliver a basic truth. So, when I come back to this poll of asking you, do you feel like you are a great storyteller? Well, what if I told you you were at the tops of your storytelling games in kindergarten? And we simply have our school systems to thank. They don't mean to necessarily, but they start closing the curtain on our innate storytelling. We have corporate cultures that say, we don't do it that way around here. We have social constructs. We have political correctness, and it all conspires to quiet that storyteller. So then when we get to our lives and we have to tell stories for a living, we are reduced to features and benefits of basal type communications. And that just simply doesn't work in this world of abundance. So again, today, I'm going to reignite in you the one true superpower we all possess. And again, that's the power of storytelling, thinking about it. I call it a superpower because you can craft the perfect email. You can give a webinar. You can do something online to communicate to people halfway around the world, complete and utter strangers, and yet you can be powerful enough to emotionally connect with them and move them to action. To me, that is a superpower. I can't think of another one. Now, how did I come about this? Well, I guess I am a brand raconteur, and I like that because I do believe that stories drive everything we do inside and outside of our brand world. I've been in the advertising world for 30 plus years. I've run my own agency, Parking Company, for 20 of those years. And for the past 10, 12 years, I have been steeped in business storytelling. And I'll get into a little bit more of the backstory of how that all came about. But it has really been underscored to me in the last 10 years about why story is more important now than ever and how we can use it to advance our social and brand missions further, faster. Now, what's interesting about this is when I started back in the day, it used to be very easy to be in the advertising world. It really did, because we had to worry about TV, radio, print, newspaper, outdoor, public relations, events, direct mail, and that was about it. Brands truly own the influence of mass media, and it made our jobs a lot easier because it could be a one-way conversation. We are going to reach out to our customers and we're going to tell them the way they should look, feel, think, and do, and then we're going to give them the product. Well, you know what? That doesn't work anymore because technology, as we all know, has completely leveled the playing field. So as I said, when brands used to own mass media, now the masses are the media. And it's all about the conversations going on around about being your brand. I mean, think about these folks. They are your brand storyteller. You happen to be the story maker. So when you do craft and tell those compelling stories, they have to be authentic, they have to be believable, and you have to be able to live into them and deliver upon each of those promises you make in your story, because these folks right here will rat you out. They will come out and they will call you out online, and we've all been, I think, in one way, shape, or form, that it's not about one-way communication anymore, that they own the story, and we need to communicate on their terms, not ours, and we need to place them at the center of the story. So here's the other interesting thing about this. So we have this great leveling of the playing field, and we have this ubiquitous ability now to communicate. I'm coming to you from my office here in Phoenix, Arizona, and yet I am being broadcast around the world, truly my own TV station. But what does that lead us to? Well, ADHD now has become a communicable disease, and we're all simply the viruses. We spread it nonstop. So how do we rise above the noise of this attention economy? It's through the power of storytelling. Now, a lot of people think that storytelling, especially in business, and especially the more educated they are, believe it's just a gimmick. It doesn't really work, that you just got to hammer features and benefits, data down people's throats. But I'm telling you what, if some of the greatest storytellers in the world made a mistake about not using story and almost went under because of it until they came back to the universal structure story, then I think it's okay for us to use it too. And here's what I'm talking about. Pixar. So here's a homework assignment for you after this webinar. A wonderful TED Talk video by Andrew Stanton. Andrew is one of the founders of Pixar, and he talks about how when they first founded Pixar, they were going to break every storytelling rule there was to break. And it almost broke the company. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to get Toy Story right before they could bring it out to the public. And you know what they did? After a couple of years of batting their heads against the wall, trying to reinvent the universal structure story, they brought in a story coach. And the story coach says, where's your story? So everything they're trying not to do, they brought back in. They created Toy Story around this. He talks about it in this particular TED Talk. And to me, it really underscores that why are we trying to reinvent things? Let's use what we know that's been around since the beginning of time, and that's this universal structure of the story. Now, let me show you how it's been a little bit effective in our lives. So, as I mentioned, I had Park & Company. I started the agency in 1995. And before I really studied story, one of the things I started looking at is how that old axiom of don't show me but tell me. And we were gifted with some consumer insight on a water conservation campaign. That this is exactly what the Consumer Insight said when polled about water conservation. They said, don't tell me to save water, show me how to save water. Don't tell me, show me. I mean, the basic premise to every story. So we created this Water Use It Wisely campaign. It started in Mesa, Arizona, tiny, tiny little budget. And we just hit a nerve. We connected people with really odd ways to save water, made them a part of the story, showed them how they could save it, but put them at the center of the story. Our overall headline was there are a number of ways to save water, and they all start with you. But what we did is created these environmental prompts of these odd ways and obvious ways to save water to connect people with them. Gave them a water saving device number and said, we want you to think about every time you're using water that you are a part of this water story. Now, I wasn't using story. This is back in 1998, 99. I was not intentional about this. I got really, really lucky because this program absolutely took off. It started in Phoenix, Arizona. First, then we got Home Depot involved as a sponsor. Then Lowe's came in a really, really big way. The campaign spread to over 400 private and public entities that use it throughout North America because, again, it had this universal story message to it. And only now when I look back do I realize why it was successful. That innate storyteller within us, the ones that we give permission to bring to life in our careers because people pay for us, we're able to put this story together and create a really remarkable campaign. And when I came back, this campaign, by the way, is still the Heath brothers wrote about it. I mean, it's really been phenomenal. And I got to tell you about this side of the story that I never anticipated. This is my wife, Michelle, and I. We are in Cyprus, on the island of Cyprus. The folks you see sitting around the table are from USAID, plus they're archaeologists from Turkey and Cyprus. And we all worked together for a week over there. They were doing some of their own work, but I was brought in to help them with the water conservation campaign on the Turkish Cypriot on the island of Cyprus. Now, something I never dreamed would happen when we started building this little water conservation campaign, but really amazing things happen. Doors open where there are only walls before when you start following your bliss. Now, that's not my quote. That's a quote of literally my mentor, and I'm going to introduce you to him in a minute. But this has the ramifications of why story is so powerful in our lives. Adelante Healthcare started 35 years ago out in the East Valley as a community health center. Well, by 2010, their business model was really under attack, and they had to revise their story. And I worked with Aveen Tafoya, and our team came together, and this is when we really applied the story cycle process to her work, and we created Adelante Sustainable Healthcare. And now Adelante is one of the leading sustainable practitioners of healthcare in the country, experienced over 300% growth when they got very intentional about their brand story, created a story that they could all live into and profit from. Now, this is when we started getting more intentional. Remember, Water Use It Wisely was a surprise in some respects, but when I look back on it, I could see my innate storyteller coming out, and I asked myself, if we got more intentional about it, what could we do? Well, Coca-Cola came calling, and we did a project for them where they were trying to get 60,000 of their fleet drivers on board with a new eco-driving training program, and they asked us to wrap this in a story that they could all believe in, live into, and prosper from. And so we did a program, and it worked with 9 different videos to kind of soften the beachhead, to get into their fiercely competitive cabs of their trucks and let them know that, man, this is about helping save the company money, saving on safety, liability behind the wheel, and oh, by the way, the byproduct of this is helping reduce carbon emissions. Well, we had so much success with this that they had simply just a 3% goal of 3% reduction of fuel and maintenance. And in the first quarter of running this program, they doubled that, and then it grew from there. Again, because we weren't telling people what to do, we were inviting them into a story from their terms, not ours. This also then led us to be able to work with Coca-Cola. Oh, there we go. They brought us in after that with the success to help launch their Freestyle machine. And we were doing this as a business-to-business thing. So we came in and worked with them on both online media and video to help reach out to the restaurants now that you see all have these machines. And we worked with them to help explain what the machine is, how it operated, the importance of it being within their establishment. And again, we put the restaurant owner at the center of the story. We use the story cycle process to bring this inanimate object to life. It was helpful that it was beautiful, designed by a Ferrari designer and interfaced by a former Apple designer, but we had to bring it through life, and we did that through the power of story. Now, this is a final example I wanted to show you because it just is so timely given what we are going through with the elections and what we're hearing with our debates and so forth. A couple of years ago, we were brought in by the Arthur N. Roop Foundation to help make debate cool again. Now, Mr. Roop is a libertarian, and he feels like the downfall of society is going to be our lack of civic debate. So from his Santa Barbara-based nonprofit, we sat down with them, took them through the story cycle process to create a brand new brand around debate called Podius. And if you have a youngster in a high school debate program, send them to podius.com or podius.org, and they have money to give away to the debate program. That's what this is all about. But we wanted to raise the interest and the entertainment factor in debate again. And so we did it through these beautiful and fun graphics that come to life on the website. But the idea here is that it is about civic debate, and we can be fun and we can be human in this process. We don't have to be throwing gloves at everything. It's about really appreciating that person from their standpoint, understanding what their story is, and then coming together to find a rightful solution. So this has all led me to something I never dreamed that I would be doing, and that would be teaching in higher education. We've had so much success with the story cycle process, from for-profit, from non-profit, to solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, large organizations, small organizations. You'll hear from them. That ASU School of Sustainability came calling. My good friend Bruno Sarda there on the left, who now is Vice President of Sustainability for NRG, asked me if I could bring the program to the new Executive Master's program. And I said yes. Never created a curriculum in my life, but they helped me through it, and it's been a ball. We're on our 3rd cohort right now. It's allowed me to reach out to international executives that are a part of this program, and executives that are associated with this program, not maybe as a cohort, but as a colleague to our cohorts, and really extend the power of the story cycle process. And now I teach them what we're going to go through the next 30 minutes is what they have 12 months to work on, and that is to how to use the story cycle process to help advance their personal and professional missions further, faster. All right, so where did this all start? Now, you know, I said been in business for 30 years, had my own agency for 20 years, and about, well, in 2006 exactly, our middle son, Parker Howell, went to film school. And he went to film school at Chapman University. And while he was going there, I said, hey, Parker, since we are paying for those textbooks, I want you to send them to me when you're done, because I wanted to do two things. I want to, number one, vet this education that is going on. Oh, I just looked down here. Is the audio gone? Can you hear me? Is the audio back up? Audio, anyone? Are you hearing me? Did we lose the audio? Oh, okay, we're back. I just looked down and saw that that was going on. Sorry for that. Audio working great now. Good. I don't know where I lost you, but I'll just keep rolling here. Started back, okay, so Parker going to film school, sent me his books, and I started reading through them, and I studied a lot about what screenwriters knew about storytelling, and it all led back to this guy. And this is Joseph Campbell, America's foremost mythologist, and he's the one who said, when you start following your bliss, only doors will open where there were only walls before. So I learned a lot. I studied not only these screenwriters like Blake Snyder, but started reading what Joseph Campbell knew about the hero's journey. And I'm sure you all, or most of you by now, have heard of the hero's journey. It's been batted around quite a bit in the advertising, marketing, content marketing world. But essentially, it's this universal structure to story. He found it, first started studying it in Native Americans, and he all these different tribes, even in different languages, were telling the same kinds of stories. By kinds of stories, I mean often followed the same format, the same formula. And then he started looking at it in religions, in races, and he took it back to the beginning of time. And it basically underscores that Aristotle, the apostles, Shakespeare, Spielberg, they've all been using the same basic form to storytelling. And you see it in the movies you love, the books you enjoy, the plays you dig, even the songs, even the short songs that you listen to. When they're really done right, they follow this very universal structure to story. That was my big aha moment, because I thought, wow, if this is that powerful in Hollywood, how could we use it in advertising and marketing? And I want to show you something here. Think about these stories. So dating back through many, many decades, Casablanca, the Ten Commandments, The Wizard of Oz, Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Brother, Where Art Thou, The Matrix, Lego Movie, and of course the most recent Star Wars. All right, real quick in chat, what do these stories all have in common? Someone, Jan, set that up. What do you think these stories all have in common? People will say, well, they got a hero. Yes, they do. There's a protagonist that wants something. There's a villain that's trying to keep them from getting it. They go on a journey. They got to fight through a lot of stuff, and then they return home. But the interesting thing about this is what they all have in common is they're all the exact same story, if you think about it. They're the exact same story. Like I said, you've got, now let's just compare The Wizard of Oz and Star Wars. You've got Dorothy in the bucolic farmlands of Kansas, and you've got Luke in the bucolic farmlands of Tatooine. They both want to escape their boring lives and go on this remarkable adventure, and then something happens. There's an inciting incident. In Dorothy's case, a tornado comes along and whisks her off into this new, unbelievable land of Oz. And in Luke's case, he returns home to find his aunt and uncle are murdered. So he's whisked off on his speedster, and he's off to Mos Eisley, and his whole world now is turned completely upside down. They all have to go on to fight amazing beasts and villains, and they have to overcome themselves and their own self-fear, doubts, and whatever. And then they have a big climactic close, and they are successful, and they return to their ordinary world with the boon. They have been leveled up, and they've been leveled. In doing so, they level up the society around them. But that basically works because it is a mirror to life. It is what story is all about. Think about it. In any great thing that you have ever achieved, if you go backwards from that success, from that achievement, you follow the hero's journey, you will see that you experience almost those exact same things in your own way. Robert McKee, the legendary screenwriting coach who's been on our Business to Story podcast a couple times, talks about story being a mirror to life. That's what we're doing. We are living through the protagonist so that we can try on trouble just to learn what we would do in case it happens to us. Well, if that's the case, if that's what really happens in Hollywood and what really works, then why in our advertising and marketing don't we do more of that? As people, powerful persuaders, what if we simply use this intentional approach? You know, it's not a gimmick, and here's how I know that it's not a gimmick. At the same time that our son was going to film school in Chapman University, our youngest son here, Cade, was experiencing some real trauma with his head. He was born with encephalitis. We didn't realize it till he was into the 2nd grade. We learned about it. His body was coping with it, and the doctors, one doctor wanted to operate him on it immediately. Another doctor, Dr. Kim Manwaring, a brilliant surgeon here at Barrows Neurological Institute, said, no, we would like to study him because his body is compensating, and eventually we're going to need to do the surgery. So sure enough, when Cade was a freshman in high school, he really started having some significant symptoms. They drilled in the top of his head. They went down. They opened up this aqueduct down below his ventricles where our brain fluid is created, and they opened it up so that it would release this pressure on his brain. Well, he's doing great now. He's 23 years old, a marvelous young man, brilliant, and really no side effects. But boy, was that road of trials for us. So while that was all going on, we studied everything we could do to understand what was going on in his brain with this pressure hitting on the different parts of his noggin, with this young man growing, puberty. And I mean, what might we face in the future if we couldn't get this fixed? So I read, again, everything I could put my hands on. And one of the books that struck me the most was this one, The Storytelling Animal, How Stories Make Us Human by Jonathan Cottrell. Jonathan Gottschall. Jonathan Cottrell is a good friend of mine here in town. Jonathan is an amazing writer, and he studied exactly what we're talking about here, the intersection of story structure and brain structure, and why we are absolutely hardwired for story to make meaning out of life around us. And if that's the case, then that's also the secret for us to rise above the noise of the attention economy and connect with people on a very human level and move them to action. Now, I want to prove this to you. I'm going to show you a very short video here. It's about 1 minute long, and you're going to take a look at it. When you're all done, if you wouldn't mind, jump on chat, and 2 or 3 or 5 of you, whoever, tell me what you see in this video. Here we go. All right, pretty weird, huh? So what did you all see there? Someone said, I saw escape. Pam, thank you for that. So you saw someone escaping from something. Vivek, you said, I see a bully. Kathy, You love that people see different things, and that is story. It certainly is, isn't it? We need to create meaning for what we see, experience. Without a doubt, we can't even help ourselves. There, Megan sees a chase, a kidnap, capture of a bully, a battle. Yeah, you know, it's really interesting because I show this at every single workshop. In fact, let me really get, I'm going to just jump back on here for a second. I show this at every single workshop I do. And it's amazing what I hear. I showed this to a bunch of librarians for the Arizona Librarian Association, which I love the irony of me talking to librarians about story. And one of the ladies said, I see kids chasing butterflies. I mean, that's pretty cool. I don't know if that comes from her worldview or whatever. One time I had a small group gathering here at the agency and we were doing a workshop. And this one lady, lovely lady, said, well, obviously it's Romeo and Juliet. You all saw Romeo and Juliet, right? And looked around the room and everyone kind of looked at each other like, well, that's not what I saw. How about you? And then I moved on to the guy right next to her and I asked him, I said, what did you see? And he said, I saw a sperm trying to impregnate an egg. I guess maybe his version of Romeo and Juliet. But it blew me away when I told Luis, our creative director, about that little story. He says, oh, great, your little Rorschach video has taken people from Shakespeare's to Porky's all in one fell swoop. And I think that's just it, man. I mean, it is the power of story. And if we as business communicators are not clear and truly own our brand story, then our audiences are going to make up their own story. If our logos don't really define who we do, those logos are going to mean something else to your audiences. If our websites are filled with clutter and we can't get people through them in meaningful ways, meaningful to them, then they're going to make up their stories about us. That's why the power of story, what Hollywood knows of the story structure and how our brains are hardwired for it, are so critical for all of us to really make a difference out there. So let's jump back to the presentation here. And after all of this, what it taught me is that story is as important to our brain for survival as oxygen is to our lungs. It's just that simple. It's the way we are hardwired to go through life. So what we did is we took Joseph Campbell's 17 Steps of the Hero's Journey. It was, you know, very much my mentor in this process, and we boiled it down to these 10 steps because we needed to make it make more sense and be more resonant with business folks in their context, not in the screenwriter's context. But we had this hypothesis that this would work, and we started applying it to brand story strategy, and it blew me away of how effective it was. Again, it's not something we invented. We simply are using what the ancients have used to help brands rise above the noise of the technological attention economy that we've created. I love the irony of that again. So I'm going to walk you through this real quick. Now, this is my business look. Let's do a personal brand look. And what I do is I want to introduce you to our character, Edgar. We were fortunate to have a Pixar artist come up with Edgar for us. And I like using this because it gets us out of our left brain rational side, and Edgar gets us more in our right brain, our emotional side. And when I'm doing workshops with people, I will send them an online form to fill out to start getting their personal brand story, their why story together. And I'll direct them to Edgar because I tell them, I want to know what your gut thinks before what your head thinks. I want to know emotionally, how are you bought into this? So some of you, hopefully if you had a chance, you could download or have downloaded the interactive workbook. If not, you can go to the tools section of Business of Story, and it's there. But we're going to take you through it very quickly, and I want you to think about this in two ways. The first time you go through this, I want you to apply this to your brand, your personal brand story, why it is you do what you do, and then think about it has ramifications on your professional brand story. You know, it's the exact same story process. You will find you can use the story cycle over and over and over again for everything from understanding yourself better to truly understanding others and appreciating the journeys they are on, to then craft brand stories that connect with your audiences on their journey so that you can go out of your way to help them get what they want. And when you do help them get what they want, they will go out of their way to help you get what you want as a brand and as a professional. So let's jump in. Now let's start with this whole basic premise, and it just seems like kind of an oh duh thing, but it's really important, especially in business storytelling. Every story has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. I know what you're thinking, duh. Well, here's what happens. In the business world, we tend to leave out the middle because the middle is where the conflict is. And yet, in this day and age, when consumers own our brand story, we cannot shy away from conflict. We cannot ignore conflict in our story. We need to use that tension to amplify our stories and create truly deeper, authentic connections with our audiences. So from here on out, whenever you have a cup of coffee, I'm going to have you think story structure. So let's just take brewing a cup of coffee in its own journey. We start at the beginning, the setup, and we introduce you to the protagonist in this story, and that's this wonderful Sumatran blend, whole bean, Pike's Place roast, whatever you want to think of as our brand, or as our protagonist. Now, it's wonderful in its own right. It smells good. It feels good in our hands. It's nice having it out on the counter. We look very organic by having it around. It's just this really nice way to open up our story. But in and of itself, we have no story unless we do something. This protagonist does nothing for us until we level that protagonist up. And we have to do that by tearing it down. And what I mean by that is we simply have to put it through conflict. So what do? We grind it up, we pulverize it, we pour scalding hot water over the top of it. If we're really twisted, we put it in a French press and we press it, comes out of the other end, and it's now sitting in this cup, and it takes a deep breath, and it's like, oh my God, I never thought I was going to get through that. Does that sound familiar in your stories? Well, right when it thinks it's been successful, right when it thinks it has arrived, it typically gets worse before it gets better, does it not? So what do? We pour scalding hot cream over the top of it. But then we end up with this delicious cappuccino. We have complete character arc in this 3-act play of making a cup of coffee. We have complete story arc. We have a setup, a middle, an end. We have setup, conflict resolution. And why is that important to us? Because as we stated at the beginning of the show, our brains are hardwired for story. It's how we make meaning out of the chaos of being alive so that we will survive this world. And if that's the case, if that's rooted so deeply in the basal part of our brains, then we as communicators can use that to, again, rise above the noise and really connect with people. So let's go through the 10 steps very quickly. I'm going to have 2 other webinars, 1 in 2 weeks, where we're going to focus just on personal brand story development using this 10-step process. And then in 4 weeks, applying that to your professional brand. But now let's just take the holistic picture of this. Step number 1, setup. Where in the world have you been? So you ask yourself questions, these 3 questions. Where have you been? Where are you now? Where are you going? And what you ultimately want to get here at this point is, what is your number 1 position in the marketplace? What do you do better than anybody else? There's another exercise within this chapter in the workbook that takes you from identifying your industry to your category, to your specialty, to your number 1 specialty, and then asks you to really define that number 1 specialty in a very cleanly articulated line. But what we want to do here is simply set the stage with who you are and what you do. What is your position in the marketplace? Number 2, who's your hero? Now, spoiler alert here, your brand and you are not the hero of the journey. You are the mentor or the guide, which is actually a more important part of the entire story. But your hero of the journey is your audience. Who are they? What do they care about? So in chapter 1, if you've identified what you are better at than anybody else, chapter number 2 kind of begs the question, who cares? Who is the audience, or who are the audiences that you are having to connect your story with, and what is their story? But we'll talk about that in a minute. Chapter 3 then is, what's at stake? So what is it that they want to achieve, that you're going to help them achieve through the telling of the story and then living into your story and prospering from it? Now this is where you start getting kind of this 2-headed story thing going, because on one hand, you need to think of what's at stake for you and your brand. What are the goals, the sales goals that you have in place in this big meta journey that you're on as a brand, as a growing brand. But in order to achieve those milestones, you have to help your audiences get what they want. So you have to explicitly understand what's at stake for them and how can you help them get there. Chapter 4, the call to adventure. So in every movie we talked about early, every story has the inciting incident. Dorothy and her tornado. Luke and the death of his aunt and uncle that set him on his journey. What is the call to adventure or the disruption that is happening in the marketplace that you and your brand is there to answer and respond to better than anybody else? So it's really important to get this in. This is where you write down your unique value proposition. You basically are taking your static #1 position in the marketplace. What do you do better than anybody else? And now you are starting to bring some humanity to it and articulating it by saying, we're here for you. In these times of change, it could be disruption happening outside of your market or something you have no involvement with, or it could be you are disrupting the market so that your product offering gains more relevance, more urgency in the lives of your audiences. And again, if that's the case, then you better deliver. We have to deliver on these promises we make in the story. But this inciting incident is important because our brains are triggering. We're starting to move towards that act 2. We're not quite there yet, but it knows something's up. It knows conflict is afoot. And we want conflict because that is the tension and story that moves it forward. By the way, conflict is the tension in our brand story that moves our brand and our businesses forward. If we have no conflict, if we have no tension, we're attempting to sell into the status quo, and who wants to be the low price leader? That's what happens. You're commoditized. So, 2, here we are in conflict. Let's dig a little bit deeper. So we know something's changed in the world, but now we're up against it ourselves. So we break this down to 3 primary elements to get real clear on about your story and what your audiences are going through and how you're going to connect those two. The villains, fog, and crevices. Villains. Who's the competition out there that is trying to take over your market or trying to keep you from gaining in that or want your market share? I also want you to turn internally on this too, is who's the villain inside your head? What's that little voice saying, talking about the fear of doing it? You need to pay very close attention to both external villains and internal villains. Number 2, fog. What are your blind spots? What is it that you don't know? And just as importantly, or maybe more importantly, what do your audiences not know? What are their blind spots about you and your brand? And then 3, the crevasses. Getting very clear on the gaps in your story. You're saying one thing, you might be doing something else. We all do that. It just happens to us. We tell a good story, but we don't always walk the talk. So you have to really understand where those gaps are because, again, you're the story maker. Your audiences are the storytellers. And if they see these gaps, they will let you get by if you're not, if you're taking care of them and you're real clear with those gaps. But if you choose to ignore those gaps between your story and your performance, they will slay you for it. So get real clear in Chapter 5, Villains, Fog, and Crevasses. What are your audiences up against to buy your product, and what are you up against as a brand to keep growing in your journey? 6, enter the mentor. Now, this is where you come in. This is all about you. When we're here at the Enter the Mentor, we want to know, what is the promise, the emotional promise people get when they work with you? What is the gift they get beyond just using your product or service? What gift does that actually bring to their lives? And then personality, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but what is the personality of the brand, and how effectively are you consistently sharing that personality across all your channels? Or are you coming out like Sybil and you got 11 different looks, feels, tones, and voices? It's easy to do, to become very disparate in your personalities, and this is a time where you really, to own your story, you have to get right and true with your personality, be comfortable with what that is about yourself, your brand, so that you're communicating and connecting authentically across all channels with the voice that truly is your voice. I heard the other day at the National Speakers Association, I can't remember the speaker, but he says, just be yourself and you'll have no competition. Here's the place, here's the part within the story cycle that really allows you to dig deep and figure out, understand who you are and how you're going to own that story and share it with the world. Chapter number 7, the road of trials. All right, so if you've been just absolutely begging to share features and benefits to this point, you're in luck. Because this, now that we set up the entire context of your story, this is the road of trials where people are buying into your brand, buying into your story. We look at 3 primary things: brand awareness, brand adoption, and brand appreciation. And where do you connect what you truly offer with these folks so they can get that gift, get that emotional promise from you, and what does that journey look like, that experience with your brand? In this part of it, you really want to understand your audiences and where they are in each one of those steps of their journey, because your story is going to pivot just a little bit. It's going to remain authentic, but you're going to tell it from their point of view, whether it's at an awareness stage, an adoption stage, or an appreciation stage. This is the area that allows you to really think about that. We then move into chapter 8, and remember our cup of coffee, where it gets worse before it gets better? We're in the road of trials. You will be uncovering all those things that, the pros and cons of interacting with your customer journey and how you help them get what it is they want. In chapter 8 is where you want to really map out what those successes look like so that your audiences know when they're there, when they achieve it, and you can be there right alongside them to help celebrate that success. Every story has to show progression, and when we are really designing progression into our brand stories, then we are there for people to help them connect on the wins as they go along. So again, where do they win through brand awareness? Where do they win through adoption? Where do they win through appreciation? Now we move into Act 3, resolution. So we have problem, we said setup, conflict, resolution. We have 2 primary chapters here. The moral of your story. So when it's all said and done, this is the North Star, the guiding light that is all about your brand. What do you do? What is the purpose? Why do you exist beyond making money? And how do you connect your shared values with your audience's shared values? Because you want to make sure that they understand to build trust that you are going to share your beliefs, you are going to connect your values, and that is how you move people to action. So your story has definite meaning to it. And as you're thinking through your brand stories, you want to be able to write down, what is the moral of the story? Why am I telling the story? What does it mean to my audience? And do I need to make that an explicit moral and spell it out to them? Or is it implicit in the power of my story and how it's woven into it? So this is an area to get very clean with what is your purpose and how are you here to help with people to connect values with values. And then finally, we live in a one and done society, but in brand marketing, we don't want one and done. We want ongoing evangelistic clients. So to be continued is the brand ritual. How do you build rituals into your brand story process so that you have people coming back for more time and time again? And as if you have seen, this is a virtuous cycle where Joseph Campbell's was a one and done. Hero starts in an ordinary world, something happens, ends up in an extraordinary world, grows in this process, returns to the ordinary world with the boon, is leveled up and levels up those around him, or her for that matter. In the story cycle, the same thing happens, but with every revolution. So just imagine this first revolution through brand awareness. And now that you've got them there, their backstory has changed because now they're aware of you and you're moving them into adoption. So you go through this whole intentional process again. What does it look like in brand adoption? And how are you trying to level them up to brand appreciation, which then is the third revolution of the story cycle process, for ultimately into ritual where you hand your story off to them and they share it with the world out there. So it's really been, a fascinating way to go through this. And now I take us back into the business world where we simplify it down to backstory, to hero, to stakes, to disruption, to antagonist, mentor, journey, victory, moral, ritual. You can follow this in these exact steps and you will be successful. We've seen it happen over and over again. And when you get really good at this, you then use these as buckets of content and change the steps. You don't have to follow them this way every single time. But when you hear a really great story, you can go back and see that every single one of these elements, story for that matter. It doesn't mean that you got to be having these big, long, epic stories. In fact, one guy last week sent me a note and says, how big does the story have to be? That is a really, really great question. And my answer to him is it's not the size of the story, it's the emotion that matters. And that's what it ultimately comes down to. And if you want to connect and have emotion, this is how you do it. Speaking of that, we've got the workbook out now. So this is years in the making. We ran out some early editions right after Social Media Marketing World, and I'm really, really proud to announce the brand new interactive version of the Own Your Story workbook. Now, this is designed to take you through everything that I've just talked about in depth. And you can use it first for your own personal brand story, of which, again, I'll talk about, and we will go through that more in depth in 2 weeks. And then you can use the exact same book and go through it for your brand story, which we'll cover in 4 weeks. You can also use it as a guide to create customer personas, to write their stories, to understand the story cycle that they're on so that they can connect with their world. And it is available now to you simply by going to bit.ly / Own Your Story Workbook. It's there, and for today only, for you in particular, because you're here, we've reduced the price from $44.95 down to $24.95, so almost half off for you, for thanking you for being here. But this is something that you can really dive into. It is an interactive PDF. You can write in it. It will be coming out on Amazon and Kindle in about a month as an ebook. But it takes you through everything we've talked about, and it's really broken down into this simple setup, so that on the left-hand side, I demonstrate how I've used the story cycle process in my own business through Business of Story. On the right-hand side, then, you simply fill it out to what the answers are to your story, to help really starting to refine your story, define your story, and ultimately owning that story like you never have before. And I'm so happy to bring Edgar into this. My first book didn't have Edgar, and I like him so much that it's great to have him now starring throughout the 10 steps. Here's an example of how you can use this to create customer personas. Again, the story cycle is the one story tool that you can use to be very, very intentional about not only crafting and telling your own stories, but truly understanding others. And you can do this using the persona guide. Throughout it, there are places that you can fill out notes. We get into this point that I was talking about earlier about understanding your brand personality. So I dive a little bit more in depth here with Carl Jung, the 12 basic primal archetypes, identifying which archetype is best for your brand, which may be supported by one or two archetypes. There's a slide share that accompanies this book, and there's also video tutorials that accompany the book. My character, by the way, for Business of Story is the creator. When I think about the personality behind what I'm trying to create and how it is a reflection of my own personal brand, my motto, if you can imagine it, it can be done. And if you can do that through the stories you tell, the stories you live into, then you will be amazed at what you can accomplish. My supporting archetypes here are what both the mentor and the guru. Now, I'm careful about calling myself a guru. I'm only very studied in it. So I come along as a guide more than a guru or mentor. And I've been doing this an awful long time. So I've got age on my side. I've seen the ups and downs, the pros and cons of campaigns that work and campaigns that don't work. And I can tell you, I've created both of them. And the ones that work follow a very intentional approach to storytelling. So I bring that through in my personality. As you get through the book, you ultimately get through this brand pyramid where your story builds up from these 4 primary attributes of position, promise, personality, and purpose. And we bring it all together. This is the tutorial videos that I was telling you about. Each one of the chapters has about a 3-minute video in it. So if you get stuck anywhere, you can pull these up and follow it through. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is get to these 4 primary elements: your brand position, your promise, your personality, and your purpose. Let me really quickly show you how it plays out in my brand. And again, going through the story cycle. So my position in the marketplace, what I feel we do better than anybody else, is the Business of Story is the #1 resource for professional services firms to achieve epic growth for their enterprise and their people through the proven power of the story cycle. That's our platform. We've seen it work in nonprofits and for-profits and large organizations down to solopreneurs, and it's the position of the marketplace that I truly am working to own and working your trust in doing just that. My promise to you, and hopefully you've seen a little bit of this today, it's a little bit harder in a webinar, but in speaking engagements and workshop, is enchantment. I truly want to enchant in all of our audiences that this is something they can do, that this is reigniting that one true superpower inside of them to help nudge the world in any direction they choose. And I hear people come up to me afterwards and say, this is so enchanting. And I think it's so enchanting is because it's so familiar to us. It's just latent. It's just sitting underneath our recesses of our conscious, rational minds. And when you reignite it in an intentional way, it's extraordinarily powerful. My gift, by the way, is to reignite that one true superpower, to bring you back that gift of superpower in storytelling. Creator, we already talked about the personality, of which I like to bring to and have some fun in this process. And then finally, what is my purpose? What is the moral of the story? Well, I really dig it when I hear people come up to me and say, thank you, you've given me a present, you've opened up my world. I now know how to change my story and live into a more powerful one. So my purpose in this world, the purpose of the Story brand, of the Business of Story brand, is Business of Story exists to help people live into their most powerful stories. That's my job. Whether it's a brand story, whether it's a leadership story, a nonprofit story, a student story, a personal brand story to build influence, I'm here to help you through the story cycle process to advance your mission further, faster by connecting with people. When it ultimately comes down to it, you boil all of these pages down into a big run-on sentence. They don't have to be run-on, but it just is the way it works for me. Here is my brand statement, and hopefully you've seen some of this come through in today's session. By flexing the one true superpower we all possess, storytelling, we lead professional services firms to epic growth through our proven story cycle process that defines your brand, creates a narrative your people can live into and prosper from, enchants your audiences, and connects your shared values with your customers so you can nudge the world in any direction you choose. And that's what the story cycle has brought to me. Now to some other folks around the world, Karina, a wonderful young lady out in Oxford, England, came and she used the workbook and we helped her get her personal brand story straight. I love this particular story because we did it very quickly within an hour after she went through the workbook. The wonderful thing about Katrina is she is a born artist, loved art, but didn't think she could make a living at it. She studied psychology and got her degree in psychology, and then she went into marketing. And she spent 5 years in marketing before having a couple kids. She then got out of marketing and raised, worked with kids, got them up into kindergarten and first grade. And now she's back in the world again, and she's trying to position herself as a marketing consultant. And this world of marketing consultants, we're all commodities unless we truly own our story. Well, when I really dug down with her and used her workbook to figure out what she was about art. She loved it, a personal passion that drives her professional pursuit. Psychology, going in and studying how the brain works. And then she was really adept at connecting dots to help the technology world make sense out of their stories and simplify so that they could connect with people better. So we came up with this line for her, the expert who helps you achieve dramatic results by tapping into how the mind is designed to buy. That is her gift. That is the story she owns. And she said she's already been out. She's landed a bunch of business because of it. And she was even at a networking event. And one of her old cronies came up to her and said, "What are you up to now?" And she basically repeated this line that I am the marketing expert that achieves epic growth for my clients because I know how the brain is designed to buy. It plays off of all three of her elements of her story and something she can really, really live into. Number two, Andre Martin Hobbs, he has a wonderful automobile dealership up in Quebec. Now, he sells to subprime folks, people that have come across some hard times, and you know how it is. I mean, these are very predatory companies. Well, he's got something different. They do make money off of high interest rates because no banks will offer lower interest rates to these folks. But he makes them come in, and they go through a free financial planning training 3 to 4 hour session before he will sell them a car. They arrive together at the right kind of car for them to buy with the right kind of monthly payment with his goal of fixing their credit within 2 years so that they can go out and buy any car they like. Well, in working through the workbook and one-on-one, we ended up with Autopouture, your vehicle to financial freedom. Simple. We went through the whole process and brought it down, and now he's running with a business story that matches his business model. And then finally, Aveen Tafoya, we talked about her earlier in the show. She's the CEO of Adelante Healthcare. Now Adelante Sustainable Healthcare was able to create this to create a brand that everyone could live into and prosper from. So that's what being intentional about owning your story can do for you. And I know I've been going a little long here. We're right at the top of the hour. We did hold a couple, 15 minutes longer. If any of you have some Q&As, I would be happy to jump over to that. Right now, let me jump into this. I know I've thrown an awful lot at you. The book is there, available for you to download and start working with. And I've just fired up, enable the Q&A if I'm doing this right. Then I'm here to answer any questions you have. Also, if you have questions that we can't get to on this show, feel free to share them on Twitter with the hashtag of Own Your Story. And oh, by the way, What we're going to do today is we're going to give away free 3 free workbooks. When you're on Twitter, tweet that you've been around, tweet that you've been on the show, or you were at the webinar, and use that hashtag #OwnYourStory. What we'll do is go in, we'll collect all the names in that, and then we'll pull out 3 lucky winners, and we will announce those to you tomorrow. So we have 3 books to give away. And again, that's the hashtag of #OwnYourStory. So I've got the Q&A opened up, and as we're just wrapping up here, I'll go back to my slideshow. And I'd like to finish with this thought of the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So please make it a good one. And that's what this is all about, is really understanding what your story is so that you can reflect it through your brand story and connect with your audiences like you never have before. And just a reminder here on this slide that we will be back in 2 weeks at this same time, same bat station, 10 a.m. To show you how to apply this to your personal brand. So it might be a good idea to download the workbook, work through it, and then you can bring that with you, and I will be available. It'll be a shorter session here that I'm presenting, and it'll be open much more for Q&A to work through it, because I have found that people really learn as much, if not more, from others than they do from me just taking you through it. So, Carlos, from where it comes the end of the story. From where it comes the end of the story. I'm not sure I'm following, Carlos, if you can elaborate on that. So we still have a number of you on. Do any of you have stories that you, or questions that you would like to share with me? I know, again, I went through a lot here. I appreciate you hanging with me as we were learning how to do this. I'm sorry that we lost some audio there for a little bit, but I'm glad we got back, and hopefully there weren't too many holes left in the story. All right, so great webinar. Thank you, Shlomi. As you know, we are live in a multi-channel environment. How would the story cycle would work in an environment where audiences interact with brands through micro moments when searching, interacting on social messaging, etc.? I think that's when, Shlomi, it's a great question. It's when you've got your story so well vetted in your own mind that you see those micro moments pop up, and you know how to, and I hate to say take advantage of them, but how you connect with them, because it becomes a very natural connection when you're dialed in with that story. We try to do that with some of our businesses story things, and we'll do it with, on Instagram. We'll try to have some fun, be tongue-in-cheek, try to express that brand personality, but always offering value when we do that. So it first starts with truly understanding that story, so you know which little story nuggets to be able to toss out there when you have things happening. Andy, you are unable to copy links in this chat as well, so please email the links, you bet. And if you would send me in particular, are you talking about the workbook link? If any of you had any challenges with this, you can certainly send me an email so I don't miss you at park@businessofstory.com, and I'll be happy to send you links to everything. I'm glad this is great. I'm glad you found it helpful. Kathy, congratulations on your new book. You guys have to get Kathy's new book, Stop Boring Me. She is like one of the most brilliant business storytelling minds out there, and she brings wonderful improv to the world of storytelling. So check it out, because it's a way to have some fun with your stuff. And she and I have a personal passion around HBO's Silicon Valley show. So I see a little bit of I see a lot of Silicon Valley in her, Silicon Valley show in her when talking about business storytelling. Great stuff, Kathy. Lisa, thank you. By the way, Lisa Leffler, big shout out to Lisa. She's been helping me through all of this at Genuine Media. Lisa has been helping me with my business community development, and she and I have been working through this webinar, so I'm glad it pretty much went off without too much flames involved. Jordan, I feel like I've taken a lot of time to expand on specific solutions, but struggling with awareness and recognition as I'm starting out. Well, Jordan, I guess awareness and recognition comes down to where are you telling your stories and who are you telling them to? How are you going about that? So, again, if you're on social media and doing a lot of inbound marketing, what kind of stories are you telling on Facebook versus LinkedIn versus Instagram, Snapchat? I don't personally use Snapchat, but I know each one of these has their own form or their own megaphone of storytelling. And you got to be really careful of how you tell stories there to get people to connect. Make sure that you're telling the right kinds of stories, the right genres of stories, if you will, on those different platforms. I don't know if that's what you're looking for in that answer, but it's knowing your story and then really understanding how you can craft it to the different channels. The other thing I've learned is when you truly own your story and you know it inside out, it makes it so much easier to share that story at different places. So imagine yourself. And let's take you out of the branding world, and let's put you in the real world for a minute. The stories you tell at a cocktail party are different than the stories you tell at a funeral. But they're still your authentic story. Your brand is still coming through. So if you're not feeling like you're connecting or getting people to buy in, maybe you're not owning and taking that story deep enough, and maybe you're not telling it the right way depending on what channels you're reaching out to. Just some initial thoughts. Webinar. Thank you, Julie. I appreciate it. And like a little winking icon there. That's great. Any last questions for me? If not, we will be sending a link out to the next webinar for everybody on this. I really appreciate you showing up today and being a part of literally our very first Business of Story webinar. I've been doing these for my ASU courses and other people, but this is actually the first time I've done it for me. By the way, I did promise ASU that we are taking applications for the next cohort, which starts in January, for the Executive Masters for Sustainability Leadership Program, and there are some really wonderful scholarships available. If you're interested in any of that, please shoot me a note. Again, park@businessofstory.com. I will make sure that you get connected with Jennifer and get all the information you need. You will learn from not only me, but 3 other marvelous professors in the program, and it's really, really a transformational program. Our students go from being executives that are aspiring to do something to truly influential leaders within a 12-month period. It's just been one of the most amazing things I've been a part of, and that's at ASU, the Executive Masters for Sustainability Leadership Program. So there's Kevin Gazzara. He teaches our leadership. I've learned more from this guy in the last 2 years than I learned from all of my professors at Wazoo in the 4 years I went there. He works side by side with me, and he teaches leadership in the program. It's a great deal of fun. So, all right, Prosper, thank you so much. Hey, great having you by the office a couple weeks ago. You'll have to swing back by if you're still in the States. And thank you all. Nilam, I appreciate it. Laura, great to have you here. And with that all, I will sign off for now. Hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks, and we'll start working on your personal brand story to grow your personal brand influence in the world. Thanks so much.